make equitable funding in CTE. We had all these different types of funding. And so not only are we trying to simplify the different types of funding, the categories of funding, even the categories and types of schools, but also simplifies the way each of our schools are funded in general. So in one new formula, Stacey, if you don't mind to go to the next slide. The $70 million in our proposal will include all CTE in Kentucky, the 50 state area technology centers, as well as our local centers and our local programs in comprehensive high school. It used to be that you had to have 5 career and technical education programs in the building in order to qualify for state funding. And going forward, that will not be the case. So we're going to have state CTE and locally operated CTE, and that's the only 2 types. That funding will be intended for increased student outcomes in their CTE pathways. It's been a tagline of our office and of KBE. We're going to say they have adopted it too. A welding student should be a welding student no matter what building that student is receiving. That student is receiving instruction in. It does not matter who owns that building, who owns that program. They should receive the same amount of resources from us. The mid-year adjustment will be eliminated. In the current LAVEC formula, there is a process to which schools get a budget, and then mid-year, that actual amount they were given changes. And so that has been a big complaint from a lot of our schools and districts, understandably, because it's really hard to set a budget when you don't know exactly what that is going to be. So it's going to be based on previous data, but once they get it, it will not change. And we've heard overwhelming, feedback that we're really glad to see that in there. In the 22 biennium, schools were not allowed to use funding at the middle school level. It was intended to bring current classrooms at the high school level up to industry standards. Going forward, we hope that we see a lot of these classrooms getting there and getting to where they need to be, and then some districts being able to focus some of their money to get that exploration down to the middle school level and provide an early pathway opportunity for students as they're going to the high school. We know that a student should have the ability and have, the opportunity to change their mind about what their pathway is, just like most of us did. But we do know if they are exposed and aware and they explore career pathways earlier, even at the elementary and middle school level, then they are more likely to find a pathway that works for them in their secondary program. There will be two kind of categories of the $70 million. 60 million of it will be allocated how it's traditionally been allocated based on a weighted full-time equivalent value of students. So that's how our current LAVEC formula is. Percent of students, 60%. I don't know what I said. Obviously it was the wrong. Obviously it was the wrong. And that's about $42.5 million. So a weighted full-time equivalent value means that we have high cost programs and we have general cost programs. A welding program is going to cost more money to run than a business administration program. So that welding program is going to be weighted 1.5. The student's going to be weighted 1.5. And then kind of in comes the performance funding metric of this that we know we want to see because it incentivizes schools to do the right things by kids, but we also know our General Assembly wants to see kind of, this level of performance funding. So we're flirting with it a little bit. There are 4 incentives that we have developed in consultation with CTE stakeholders. We've had a committee that convened to come up with what these incentives should be, as well as input from the legislature. These directly correlate with the Association of Career and Technical Education's indicators of high quality CTE and also with our accountability system. So concentrators, technical skill attainment, work-based learning, and CTE dual credit are the 4 incentive categories that we've identified. A student can earn up to 4, 1 in each category of each school they are enrolled in pathway in. It will follow the student. The money will go to the school. So if the student leaves their home high school and takes their pathway at the area technology center, the area technology center is going to get the funding for that student. So Overall, this is going to not only provide more resources, more funding for career and technical education in general in our state, but particularly the area technology centers for them to be included in this funding is wonderful.
So Megan, before you slice it and dice it even further, this may be a Karen question, and I think it might be kind of a dumb question. I apologize, but the proposal would be for this to be included in the department's budget moving forward, or in the state, the big state budget moving forward, the 70 million.
We just don't want the language that says LAVEC around that 70.
Okay.
We want that out of the budget bill.
Okay.
And then this would be separate legislation.
Okay.
Last year, when Mr. Horseman himself was lobbying, this mission or the overall statement from Senator McDaniels was eliminate these different layers and vocabulary, because I'm confused by it. So come back to me with one type of situation, one funding formula, so that it's easy for me to put it into that budget each particular year. But he didn't want layback anymore, ACT. He didn't want us to talk about ATCs, layback,
Comprehensive high school.
comprehensive high school. It's just vocational attainment, and Rep. Petrie, the same thing. It's about workforce development, not the titles of these.
Yes.
So I think you did a very good job of meeting what they were asking for when we were.
Simplifies it, yeah.
I do have a question though before, because when we were doing that funding and we were looking at the total increase of costs we were asking for, middle schools were not part of that. So the one question I do have based on, I mean, we did shoot for the moon and we got it from the legislature last year. Are we diluting what our anticipated costs that we were looking at for our other programs to move to the middle school? So I'm concerned about that. We looked at that funding, even though it was great, but it's not necessarily guaranteed from year to year. And it was 20 years since we had a last increase. So are we?
Right. Well, the bill draft does actually include that they must be approved to use their funding at the middle school level. And so they will submit a plan for either how they anticipate providing that exploration piece at the middle school level, or how it directly connects to one of the pathways that they have available at the high school. Perhaps they're going to offer the entry level course of the pathway to eighth graders.
So if I'm interpreting correctly, then I, as the school district, are getting this funding, and then I could include it for middle school, but we're not creating a whole new layer of middle school.
And middle schoolers would only qualify on the 60% full-time student equivalent side.
No, so this
Because
is,
they can't earn the incentives.
this is the formula that the district,
Yes.
this is the formula that's going to be used for the district's allocation. And then the districts can elect with their overall allocation to spend some of that funding at the middle school level.
Okay, once the money's assigned.
Okay.
We've tried, one thing that we've heard is we need some flexibility on how we spend this money at the district level. And so we've tried to work that in, because we don't want to tie their hands. We're not in every school every day, so we don't know what everyone's individual needs are. So we're going to try to make it as flexible as possible, just to ensure that it's used with fidelity and.
Yeah, because I had a question from someone in middle school, but the way you're explaining it,
Yeah.
I can live with that. I think that's a local decision then for them if they're going to explore that pathway in the younger grades. That's a district decision. Then it's not mandated that they have to.
I see it that way too, Randy, and I think the high school folks are going to realize that the better that job they do at the middle school, the more incentives the kids are going to be eligible for when they matriculate to high school.
Right.
And we do know that we got a lot of money, we're very thankful for that. And so our hope is that they really did use that wisely in the first 2 years.
Yeah.
They've been able to
Set
replace
themselves
all
up
of that
for that.
equipment and to get themselves up to par, so that hopefully they are set now that they would be able to use a little bit more of it in an innovative fashion.
I think the way you're explaining it is very good. I mean, it answers a lot of questions.
We love that students can stack their incentives just like we want them to stack their credentials. It encourages continuing to build a student's skills even after they've hit that one check mark in career readiness.
On that last point, I mean, that was what we continued to hear, that, we're funding it, now we want results. And I think the incentives is the result.
We've had really good feedback. So, but again, if you have any questions at all, or need any additional information, please feel free to let us know, because we want to make sure that we're addressing any potential issues upfront.
These funds will greatly benefit ATCs in regards to purchasing upgraded equipment, supplies, tools, things of that nature will be a great benefit to the ATCs. To bring them up to where they need to be, but to provide those greater services for students. So we're excited about that.
So my understanding on this is just an update, so we don't have to vote on it, informing us of information. That's what I get.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody from the committee to the ACT department?
Really random question.
Okay.
All of you to think about. And we had this conversation with superintendents over this past conference weekend. And I had the chance to hear at NASB, Julie Pyle and I, at NASB and Patrice, heard from Hadi, can't remember his last name, CEO of Code.org. We're going to be talking about computer science today. And one of the provocative things he said, Todd, you may recall, is that in the next 5 years, high schools and post-secondary institutions are going to have to start credentialing students' ability to work in a predictive and generative AI environment. So in terms of thinking about our programs, whether it's Perkins eligible or not, this idea that he was really pitching to the state board, school board members was, we've got to think pervasively about our students' abilities to live in an AI world as soon as 5 years from now. So I'm wondering, just as you guys think about it, if we're having those conversations beyond just thinking about computer science, because his point was comprehensive high schools need to be thinking about math with AI and language arts with AI, and everybody's got to come to grips with the reality of the pervasive nature of that.
Okay. I think has just recently left a branch manager over our pathway. So Brent, do you want to address that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a very great point. And so there are already conversations in the Office of Parent Education and the Career Programs and Pathways branch about getting those courses and eventual pathways established for our students. The consultants are already working on at least getting a course established within the pathways that already exist and then developing from that. So they're already starting on that because it is such a high need for our students.
And I don't think that the core areas are going to figure this out until you guys show them. So that's excellent. Thank you. You're welcome for the pop quiz. You pass.
Thank you.
I think what's important that is a core question for our other committee that's meeting right now.
100%.
They have to drive that
You're right.
across the board. I mean, I think.
CTAD can lead the way though.
Correct. But it's got to be across the conversation because I know that schools are out there debating that particular topic that you have. And some still want to try to ban it and some are embracing it. Well, we got to embrace it. We can't ban it. It's not going to work.
Right.
So great.
It's a workforce question for sure.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, there's all kinds of the opportunity there, but that's also where it goes back to the incentives and the funding in the future to stay up with that because, you know, as you just said, there's 70% of the jobs are going to be augmented jobs. The 30% of those are going to be new jobs. AI is going to be part of 100% of both of them.
Exactly.
So any other questions? Random questions?
It's not a random question. I mean, it's provoked by what we're already acknowledging. There's some things that are going to be kind of universal and fundamental with respect to anybody participating in the economy right into the workforce. And while the CTEs are industry specific or credential specific, I think we still are all faced with the fundamental question of appropriate data collection and documentation of impact and performance. And so, you know, we can count credentials. I know that we are always looking at ways of counting and recognizing impacts based on participation in the workforce, based on staying. But I really want to encourage us to always be thinking about how you document performance and impact, and how we engage students and knowing, are we are they ready for the workforce that they encounter, the opportunities that are there, so that we are feeding ourselves intelligence that will challenge us in program development? Because we are operating in a future, in a dynamic that is, the pace of change promises to actually speed up exponentially. And you know, our students are gonna have to, they're gonna feel it. So, I mean, I've always been proud of the CTEs. It's really great. But every time I visit one, I wonder how much of the future is reflected here. I mean, you gotta be ready for the here and now, but I wanna know, are they really a competent learner in this industry so that they can be ready for tomorrow? And so my soapbox is not worry, because we're so used to, we're anchored to credentials, which actually represent a snapshot. And so I want to know, are we ready for those students to go out there and build their own picture, create their own career? The jobs that are here now, how long are they going to be here? And so.
Sharon, I think you make a really strong point, and one that that all of our P12 schools are wrestling with. And one of those nexuses where the portrait of a learner really adds a lot of substance to the CTE conversation around the idea that we want our kids leaving us learning to learn with a credential in their pocket. But that credential has to also be the passport to, it has to be elastic. It has to be something that they can use and then rely on in order to be successful in a highly uncertain 21st century workforce.
In the governor's budget last year, or in that ended up going through the Senate, there were about 10 additional local districts that were awarded funds for building a local. So is that incorporated into your budget there if they do get up and running or not? Or if I'm one of those 10, how do I go about applying for the funding? Because especially with the gap that they created, or what they're calling for, they don't have money for the equipment after they build a building. So
It does have, we have worked in so that hopefully because we're anticipating, because current technical education is needed. Everybody knows that. So I think, you know, we've got some momentum behind us right now. So we fully anticipate that we're going to have requests for assistance in starting up new programs. And of course, we'll be looking at high demand, high wage, you know, and making sure that it truly is needed in that area. But we also believe that when you get into the real nuts and bolts of this funding formula, that we will have some innovation funds that we would be able to help set some programs up. So now, as far as facilities goes,
yeah,
we're not going to have enough money to build one, but you know.
That's got to be a line item.
Exactly.
But I'm just, you know, it's always hard to get the building and have the appropriate equipment. Now, also, part of that was the year before last year, and I don't know what ended up in the last bill, but it was that we had to meet the 5 most demanding workforce sector needs in that area. So did that stay in for those new centers so that they would have to meet the high demand for those areas and they just can't pop up?
In the new centers, I'm sorry, I don't know.
For the new centers, the funding was appropriated to school districts last year.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure about how that funding.
It hasn't completely kind of run through the governor's office.
Yeah.
We have been, you know, kind of consulted in the proposed budget that's upcoming. They're going to ask for another 100 million.
Yeah.
It's in SFCC's budget.
Yeah. We're not sure what their criteria is for how they select to allocate that money.
Okay. Was based on that, so I just, yeah.
I believe
It makes sense that they would, because that Secretary's Department, you always had to be the 5 most demanding
Yes.
from their standpoint.
And I believe that SFCC actually did a survey type to districts. Do you need facility support? And that's kind of the list that they came up with. It's my understanding that all of those that showed interest or need have been funded. So SFCC is, I'm assuming, going to supply the next list of needs to the governor's office.
Mr. Chair, one more.
What she's doing.
I'm sorry, it's kind of in response to Dr. Robinson. You know, the portrait of a learner everything that you have laid out in there, we believe that CTE really addresses that, the student engagement, the individualized instruction and learning. And so I think, again, going back to your comment, very relevant comment. And we hope, we've got a lot of data that's out there with KY stats that shows the median wages based on the credentials that you have. And so but that's something to look into if there's anything else that we can't collect that would help us. So appreciate you bringing that.
We're also involved in some work, kind of diving into what a credential of value truly is, and are the credentials that are being issued not only at the secondary level, but especially at the post-secondary level. Do Kentucky employers actually value those credentials? So that is definitely, at the forefront of what credentials we want to provide at the secondary level as well.
Oh, this is a big part of the economy for our students and for our communities, because I would like to be really confident that our students feel empowered, emboldened, even as consumers of subsequent educational services. Because I want them to be kind of conspicuously aware of needing to be a continuous learner. But we also don't want to be vulnerable as consumers of educational services. So, it ripples in so many different directions that it kind of boggles the mind. So I don't want this is not theoretical. This is pretty practical.
Unfortunately, there's another committee that meets the same time as ours. If you had the opportunity, you need to visit Logan County and Greenup County. It's both presenting to the others. And that would put a lot of your concerns and worries to rest if you saw those two programs and see what they're doing there. Because I visited both of those and they're both doing great. What I really love about Greenup County and answering what you just were asking of the committee there is that Greenup County changed to a totally market-based type of CTE type of program. And every program there services the community in the particular not only services the community in existing jobs, but in creating new jobs, entrepreneurial style things that they're doing. It's just amazing the work because they're all operated as requests coming in from the community, fixing the different things, replacing. And then they also have an outboard motor situation where those are on mechanics on the outboard motors. It can go to any place around the country. As a mechanic, they're certified by Johnson Industry, the motor company itself. Just tremendous thing. So I think if you if you visit a school, make sure you ask them and stop in and see their CT. It's just amazing what work the kids are doing today versus the work that they were doing 10 years ago. But a lot of that has to do with what equipment did they have, and were they working on antiquated equipment or up-to-date equipment? The challenge for us in CTE continues to move forward, even though we received the funding, is to keep the funding so we update the equipment, because it was for 20 years that we couldn't update equipment. So we were teaching kids on equipment, students on equipment that was outdated, but they still got the job skills. But they had to be retrained when they went somewhere else. So the goal is, to me, the goal is right now for the legislature is for them not to keep that funding stagnant. That's why I asked that. We have to have an increase each year to keep up with AI and the other stuff because the school can't do it. There's no state funding.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I
You
may,
gotta move to the next committee.
okay,
too.
sorry. So school report card data, this number may be incorrect, but it appeared that there was an 8% decline in CTE enrollment in Kentucky last year.
I'm not sure. I would have to go back and look. I don't know.
Okay. That would be a question maybe for a future committee conversation about what the health of the enrollments are looking like. And I wonder too, if a question for the future might include what's it looking like in terms of the cost per student in CTE programmings around the state. I'm asking the same thing about School for the Deaf and School for the Blind as well, just to have some comparability, understanding of those expenses.
Any other question I had, and I think it's on the agenda I don't think we've passed it on the consent. My question was going to be if you all is, I know that you were proposing the thing on the salaries to come up because some weren't there. And I'm all in favor of
It's an
that.
action.
Yeah, but what my thank you all, and you're going back, is that's still way too low compared to average salaries in the district. And I know you can't necessarily do it all at one time, but we got to continue to look at that because you're not going to get CTE instructors for that state minimum salary schedule that's on there. I mean, I'm going to work in a school district before I work in a state ACT and make 15,000 more in some cases that I did. You know, if I'm working in a ACT or Fayette County, a local program versus an ATC, I'm really taking a hit.
We're trying to eat the elephant one bite at a
Right, I
time.
know.
That's actually on our next agenda for.
Yeah, I think it's good. I just think we've got to continue to think about that because we keep talking about how critical it is, but I mean, anybody in any of those fields, and it's true in general education as well, but when it comes to CTE, and you're asking a welding instructor to work for 40 to 50,000 less, it's not happening. A CI instructor, it's not happening. So especially when some of those are year-round positions. And there's just, okay. We have to move to our next thing. So thank you all from the career development. Right now, what we want to do is we have our KDE Associate Commissioner Greta Hilton, KDE Division Services Shannon Sparkman, and KDE Division Director Karen Worth, and KDE Assistant Director Emily Rowley provide us on the update for the Kentucky School for the Blind. A lot of you said.
Or Shannon.
And you got it, and Lou was taking up all your minutes. I was trying to.
Mine says we still have an hour and a half, so.
Oh, you don't. We only got 20 minutes left.
No wonder, sorry.
Trying to move.
Okay, I think they're
That's okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to present again. It's nice to see everybody. What we're going to do is a high level overview of fiscal year 23, where that has been reconciled. Down that budget for you a little bit. Karen has joined us to kind of go through that and then present the funding allocations for.
Hey, everybody, you didn't think you'd see me talking budget anytime soon, did you? This is a lot easier though than the $6 billion we just talked about last month. Okay, so we're gonna talk about KSB first. As you all know, KSB and KSD do receive what we call a line item amount in the biennial budget. So there is an actual paragraph in the budget that says KSB is going to get this much and KSD is going to get this much. So while that's always, it's a blessing and a curse, I think, in my world, because you do have funds appropriated specifically for you. However, it may not be what you definitely need. So we've seen that in the past. We've had to supplement the schools a little bit, but they're doing okay. They're doing okay. We've got good people at the helm, and so we're moving forward. For KSB in fiscal year 23, they did receive $8,091,600. As you all know, we did receive an 8% increment the first year of the biennium. That increment, if you look at the budget bill, that amount does not include the 8%. So it actually came from KBE operations money that we received in general funds. So the 8 million does not include the 8%. There's an additional 518,400 that was the 8% increment that we took from the LARS appropriation and funded that. So that made their total 8,610,000. Our personnel was spent at 7.4 million. Operations at 1.1, and of course we spend what we get. So that's general fund money. It lapsed on June 30th, and so we received it and we spent it.
And the 8% was salary increases only.
That's correct. Yep. So next slide, please. And there's some other funds that KSB receives. First being what we refer to here as restricted funds. Those are funds that do not lapse on June 30th. They roll from year to year. They could be, so they're cumulative, right? So they could be a combination of, we receive Medicaid money for certain services that we provide to students. We receive money from USDA for participating in the National School Lunch Program. Those types of funds go into these restricted funds. Also, donations can go there if someone donates for, on behalf of a student. Or we've had people, when they pass, they'll leave endowments in their will to the Kentucky School for the Blind or the Deaf. So the restricted funds, main thing to remember, they don't lapse. And also what we try to do in our closeout process every year is, the concept is you want to zero your general fund, right? So if there's a balance of general fund, if we've expended anything in restricted, we move those expenditures over, zero this out, and that frees up our cash on this side. It's an accounting practice that we do, and that helps us keep a healthy balance in our restricted funds. KSB also receives IDEA Basic, IDEA Preschool. You see that's a very small amount, and I'm not, I believe those are calculated based on the December 1 child count, but I'm not that familiar with how that funding formula works. That's done in OCL. Also, Safe Schools and Extended School Services are both part of that Flex Focus pot of money. And they do receive $20,000 for Safe Schools, $15,000 for ESS. And then there's funds for Gifted and Talented as well that goes to KSB.
So since they're funded outside the SEEK formula, do they get the add-ons or just these?
Just this.
Okay.
Next slide, please. This is a breakdown, as you can see, as Larry was sharing, largest part of the allocation is personnel. So 97% of the personnel cost at KSB is for staff, salaries, and fringe. We do have several personal service contracts. They provide, specifically at B, they provide OT and PT services. We've got a music instructor and an art instructor on a personal service contract. So just about 3% of KSB's personnel budget goes for those professional services. Next slide, please. Just a breakdown of their operating. Their operations includes their utilities, general maintenance around campus, that's around 60%. Supplies, that could be classroom supplies, that could be supplies for maintenance, janitorial supplies, runs about 25%. 11 on technology, and then for travel, and that's not just staff travel, that's student travel as well. We have athletic teams at KSB that travel, so about 5% of their operating budget was spent on travel last year. Next slide. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for D for 23, and then we'll move to 24. KSD received 10.8 or almost 10.9. Their increment was 735.7. So their total for 23 was 11.6 million. We received that and we spent that. Next slide. These are their additional funds. They do have a restricted fund as well. They received a little bit more in IDEA Basic and Preschool. Same amount for the Safe Schools. And I'm sorry for but looks like ESS is not on there. Safe Schools is 20,000, ESS is 15,000. They receive Gifted and Talented. And then they have a preschooler at KSD. So they get a little bit of money for preschool from the state preschool pot. Let's see, 98% is for staff salaries and fringe. And then 2% is for contracts and personal service contracts. Theirs at KSD is primarily interpreting services. We have a lot of cost around interpreting services. And next slide. Their operations breakdown, they look a little bit higher on the operations side for maintenance. They're a bigger campus. They got a lot more buildings than KSB has. So their breakdown is a little bit higher on the operations side. 11% for supplies, technology, and then their travel comes in about 3%. Any questions about 23 that I could answer? For ESS and Safe Schools, just an FYI, since they both have the same amount, that's the base amount. So if you fall under a certain amount, you automatically get a base amount of 15 for ESS and 20 for Safe Schools. And I believe both schools utilize Safe Schools money for their SROs, because we do have SROs at both campuses.
So if there were flex focus funds and professional development center for school safety, then they would get, or professional development, they would get those.
Yes. All right, for fiscal year 24, which is where we are right now, we're already into the second quarter of the year. Next slide.
Sorry, Karen, if they do get flex focus, can they flex it just like schools?
They can, they can flex it based on the program flexibility language in the budget bill, so they can move it between safe schools and ESS.
Yes.
Not out of preschool.
Into preschool, but not out.
That's correct, yeah. Okay, for 24, the House Bill 1 allocated 8.1, just about 809,700. Again, the increment that we've received on salaries was not included in that amount. So the 6% increment for fiscal year 24 is 479,800. So their total is 8.5, almost 8.6 for fiscal year 24. They started the year with approximately $300,000 in their restricted fund. They also have a donations fund that is that was established specifically for an endowment that was received, probably 20 years ago. So that is what that account is for. They have IDEA Basic, just the same as what they received in 23, those same categories: safe schools, gifted and talented, and then extended school services. Next slide. KSD. They received 10.9, just about 10,876,100. Their 6% was 650,100 for a total of 11,526,200. You can see there the restricted fund came in at about 350 on July 1st. They have a donations fund as well, and I just wanted to share that 890,000 of that 1.2 million is from the sale of Walker Hall. I don't know, there's a lot of you that have been on the board for a while that remember there was a parcel of land in a building that was sold on KSD's campus to the city of Danville, and it went for 890,000, and that money is there. We are currently working with the administration at KSD, and of course with Shannon and her team. That money needs to go back into the campus, right? It needs to go back into, there's conversation, I think, about a pavilion, about a sensory area for students, some different ideas that we're batting around for campus improvements for the students using those dollars. And basically what we'll do is we'll establish a capital project, put the money there, and then we'll be able to do a brick and mortar type project. A little bit different for KSD than KSB is they do receive Perkins dollars. KSB does not. And I think that's all. Those are the numbers that you see. Their preschool went up a little bit. It looks like they may have, what is that going to be? Probably 3 preschoolers now. So that's good to see that we're growing there. I think that's the end. So, I got free capital. It's one of my favorite topics. Okay, so you all know that I've shown you all this in our budget request process. We have been so fortunate to receive capital funds the last several biennium. We've got 3.1 million in a maintenance pool, roof repair, HVAC pool, dormitory and cottage renovation, Lee Hall, and then our safety and security pool. So we have probably, I can't remember the last time I counted. I think we've got about 32 active capital projects going on at both of those campuses. So we are rolling. We have had studies done by our design team that won the RFP through the facilities finance. And we've got that 33 million budgeted and we're going to spend it on HVAC. So we're really, really excited about our capital projects. They're moving. So just wanted to share that again with you since that was another source of income for them. Next slide. That's us. Questions?
Does T. Hewlett still help with the capital?
He does, yes. He's still with us, and we so appreciate T. He's our boots on the ground kind of guy, and we've got a maintenance person at each of the campuses as well that work directly with him, but then also work on that day-to-day stuff that happens. You need to fix a lock or a doorknob or whatever. So it's a pretty good process. We've got a great team. Great team.
Questions from the committee? Well, thank you very much for the report and update. So it's great to see that we do have the capital funds going in.
Yes, very excited about that. Thank you all.
So at this time, I'm going to request a motion and a second to vote to adjourn the committee meeting. Steve made the motion, second.
Second.
Okay, voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? And we will stand adjourned.